He is my co-host on Fox and Friends Weekend. He is my co-host of both Off the Wall and Off the Grid within Fox and Friends. And he is my co-host every other week here on the Will Cain Show with what we should probably brand Off the Rails. What's up, man?
Oh, I like it. I like it. That's official.
Off the Rails with Pete Hegseth.
Off the Rails. Yep, done.
I like it, too. I like it. Let's start with Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader who has been in the Senate most of our lifetime,
forever,
who's been leading the Senate for decades, is said he's going to resign later this year, Pete. You know, this is an interesting one in that, you know, much of the right is sort of, I don't know, celebrating moving on from Mitch McConnell, and you can understand why. He is a symbol of inside Washington, D.C. politics. His ideology on the right seems to be of yesterday, not necessarily in touch with the Republican Party of today. But I do wonder, I wonder what this means for Republicans. I mean, who comes next? But I got this other thing, Pete, I don't know if we fully understand the job that is Senate Majority Leader and what's been done for the past couple of decades by Mitch McConnell.
What has been done? I mean, so that's a fair question. There's a lot behind the scenes that we're not familiar with. Most folks don't know this. I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill for probably 3 or 4 years of my life. Over the course of 3 or 4 years, spent a lot of time meeting with folks like Mitch McConnell, like John Cornyn, like John Thune, like John McCain, like Lindsey Graham, time and time and time again. It was usually about the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, the troop funding, or the VA. And so you learn quickly where the real power is. You meet with enthusiastic young senators and young reps that are right there with you. None of it matters unless the guy at the very tippy top of the committee or the conference is on your side. That's really all that matters across Washington. And so all the power really does become consolidated in one person and the view of that one person who spent their whole life getting to that one place where they can make all the calls. And Mitch McConnell was one of the very best at that, from fundraising and campaigning and just like Nancy Pelosi, one of the very best, meaning the caucus was beholden to Mitch McConnell for reasons that were below the surface that the electorate never understood. So you can have all these young bucks that are much more aligned with MAGA or America First or Trump, but they have no institutional power compared to what Mitch McConnell has. My issue with him as a conservative is the way in which he wielded institutional power, which looked a lot more like establishment republicanism or Democrat light, or really good in the opposition, but then really weak on the offense. And the one takeaway the one really bright spot was his blocking of Merrick Garland, which took a really big set of cojones to prevent Barack Obama from appointing a Supreme Court justice. And instead, Donald Trump was able to, and it changed forever the constitution of the court. So I do think this is a huge turning of the page, but who gets picked next will tell us whether or not it's still an institution run by the cloakroom or whether it's an institution which reflects the base of the Republican Party. And that's going to come down to half a dozen to a dozen senators who sit at that inflection point, which is not the Freedom Caucus and not the establishment leadership, who have to decide which direction they're going to go to and whether they think it'll affect their election prospects vis-a-vis a primary challenge in the future on the Republican side. That's my thought.
Well, okay, I don't think I'm playing devil's advocate, but I'm trying to be a realist. So there is no doubt that Mitch McConnell ideologically represents the Republican Party of yesterday, but I think it's pretty unassailable that he represented that version of republicanism very successfully inside the Senate. Like everyone says, I mean, you pointed to Merrick Garland, right? No one knows, for example, parliamentary procedure. And that's not just simply like, Robert's order of business or whatever. Like he knew how to use the Senate in a way to accomplish victories. And like you point out, the cloakroom, he seems to know exactly how the clock is put together and how one wheel spins the other wheel, and therefore where you can find your victories within the process. And I do wonder, if you don't need somebody like that on your team. Now, there's a separate debate about whether or not Mitch McConnell is on the team of modern day Republican movement or conservative movement. That's a separate debate. But I do, like, if you were drafting your team, like, I don't think anybody's saying, hey, I want Mitch McConnell to be my president. No. But do you need a Mitch McConnell on your team that is like your offensive coordinator who can draw up plays, who understand? The Senate, by the way, to your point, is kind of supposed to be that cloakroom in a way. What do they call it? The cooling saucer of democracy or something like that? Like, it's not supposed to reflect populist sentiment. That's why we have 6-year terms for the senators. Like, they should be principle-oriented, those principles being foundational, obviously. And I just kind of wonder, like you point out Merrick Garland, I just wonder, like, whoever it is, I think you need somebody with a similar skill set as Mitch McConnell.
Yes, but you want him to be like a gangster for the cause. And that's never what it really felt like with Mitch McConnell. It felt like somebody, and I'm looking here right now at kind of how long he was in the minority for a long time, or the majority whip, but he was really only the majority leader, meaning he was able to drive what was happening in the Senate from 2015 to 2021, which is basically the term of Donald Trump, half of which he spent fighting Donald Trump, and the other half of which was spent trying to get an Obamacare repeal, which ultimately failed with the John McCain thumbs down vote in the Senate. So when you look at policies that change the lives of the American people, or the trajectory of our republic, what's the stamp of Mitch McConnell? Okay, so you've been in the halls of power for 20 years as a leader with the gavel. How did my life get better? Did the debt, did you address the debt? Did you properly adjudicate foreign wars? Did you protect our border? Did you pass massive tax cuts? Did you give me my money back? I don't see big wins. Now, he would point around and say, well, you have no idea what we forestalled. Like, my tactics held back. And he might be right. But I feel like we're at a moment where simply being an establishment conservative that attempts to hold back the bad isn't sufficient, because there's so much bad. And that's why I like what Trump represents. And you'd want a majority leader in the Senate, should they get the majority, that reflects that's prepared to wield power that undoes Washington power, as opposed to is a part of it.
Oh, I think so I think you stumbled upon it. I don't mean to suggest you stumbled.
Using my best word.
You accurately targeted it. No, you really put it well. So what I hear, so maybe Mitch McConnell can be best characterized as somebody who was very well suited to play defense. In a way, that was conservatism. William F. Buckley founded National Review with the motto of standing athwart history, yelling stop. And by that, conceding that the inevitable march of history is toward progressivism. And the role of conservatism is to, in the spirit of traditionalism, say, hold on, you're upsetting the apple cart. Hold on, you're going too fast, right? But it does suggest, it kind of like grants the theory of the inevitable march. And so Mitch McConnell might have been effective playing defense and yelling stop to some degree, whereas you point out, like, he steps into majority leader with Donald Trump, and now he can play offense, and he keeps playing defense against Donald Trump.
Correct. Yes, very much better said and more succinctly. I think we're at a moment where I would like my executive and Donald Trump to say, I'm hereby decertifying the Department of Education. And then he's got an ally in the Senate that says, and we're, instead of funding the Department of Education, we're going to block grant that to the states. Who in this caucus is with me? Because we're done with this garbage. It's not working at the federal. I think we need a radical conservative who's willing to say big changes are needed right now if we're going to reorient this ship of state, not nipping at the margins of how we used to do business in a slightly different way because we're Republicans and we're in charge now. I just don't think that's Mitch McConnell. I don't know if that's who will replace him either, but I'd like it to be somebody that would sit in the White House with a Trump administration and say, we have a moment in time that we'll probably never see again. Our republic is on the brink. We're going to be criticized either way. What are the most drastic measures we can take that get us back in the direction we should be headed? And I want to be an ally in that, not an opponent.
When I was thinking about Mitch McConnell, the analogy that I was thinking about bringing up with you is LBJ. Like, LBJ, by most estimations, was a bad president. I placed him on one of my 5 worst presidents. I think I did the list last week, like worst presidents in American history, and LBJ made the top 5. But by most accounts, he was a very effective senator. And what I mean by that is if he's on your team, he's getting it done. And I started to think like, well, we need a guy like Mitch McConnell on our team. But the thing about it is, the difference is LBJ was on offense as a senator, and he got things done. Like for his cause. And it made me think, have you ever heard, Pete, LBJ ordering pants?
No. Sounds great, though.
Okay. He's president of the United States. I'm going to try this, okay? I want you to listen. It's a 2.5-minute call of him ordering pants. And I'm 50 seconds in. We'll play like 30 seconds because I think this is gold. Like, you got to hear LBJ ordering a pair of pants from a Dallas pant maker. He's in the White House. Hager pants. You probably remember Hager, like khakis and like. Here he is. He's calling Hager. Listen to this.
So leave me at least 2.5, 3 inches in the back where I can let them out or take them up, and make these a 1/2 inch bigger in the waist. Make the pockets at least 1 inch longer. My money and my knife, everything fall out. Wait just a minute. Hello. Now another thing, the crotch down where your nuts hang is always a little too tight. So when you make them up, give me 1 inch that I can let out there, because they cut me. They're just like riding a wire fence. These are the best that I've had anywhere in the United States. But when I gain a little weight, they cut me under there. So leave me, you never do have much margin there. Let's see if you can't leave me about 1 inch from where the zipper ends, round under my back to my bunghole.
What? Where in the world? Please tell me how this applies to Mitch McConnell. You are a piece of work.
Because they were senators, effective senators, perhaps. One on defense and one on offense. LBJ, this is a man, by the way, when you hear that clip, which I've listened to it so many times in my life, literally in the seat of power. Like, this is a man, he does not, how about the burps in the middle of it? And worried about the pants being too tight in his bunghole. I mean, have you heard the stories about him pulling his cabinet staff into the John with him? While
Yes, I have heard those stories.
He's seated on the throne. You talk about Washington, D.C. cloakroom power now ascending to the heights of the White House. This is a man who is feeling his power.
It doesn't feel like Mitch McConnell would do that, but it does feel like it feels, I don't know this for certain, but I've dealt with this office. I mean, Mitch McConnell relishes the ability to keep his flock in check, more so than drive the overall direction of the Senate and legislation getting passed, which is what felt like more like what an LBJ was able to do. And we got to listen to his bunghole tape.
I think you're right. All right, let's move to this. On Fox and Friends and our segment Off the Grid, we talked about Americans turning to hunting, turning to farming as a way to combat inflation, the rising price of food. Food is now the highest since 1991, 11% of disposable income for Americans. And then you showed some of your eggs on air because you're now a chicken farmer and you're living off the grid.
Absolutely, 100%. Amateur. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
I am.
Tell the
now,
audience.
Hold on. You rattled off
about
a lot
how
of
you
great
got owned by a rooster
about inflation. You did, and it does. By the way, we didn't get into all of that. Like, the chicken food is expensive, so it's not clear we're actually making out financially by doing. For a lot of people, whether it's inflation or it's sort of the general instability of life, or it's going back to your roots, it's going back to understanding how we've talked about this: produce things, make things, do things on your land with your hands, with tools, with skills, things that are forgotten often in the modern era. So people who are doing those things often start with chickens, which we started with, and we started with zero knowledge, as you know, as I've shared with you, very little knowledge, a little bit of internet knowledge and my neighbor's knowledge. And they said, you can't mess it up. And so I don't know if you want me to tell the whole story. I can tell it quick.
I do, because you did mess it up. You got owned by a rooster until
I got owned by two roosters.
You brought out the 9.
So we got
you brought out the 9 millimeter.
We got 9 chickens for the 9 of us in the family, And we thought they were all hens. That was the idea, because you're supposed to get hens because hens lay eggs, and you don't need roosters. You need them in the wild because they scare off prey, but you don't need them in a docile environment. Well, turns out 3 of them turned out to be roosters, and one of them was the king rooster. And the rooster's going to do, and the rooster must have went through puberty, because they go through puberty. And once they go through puberty, they have a desire to do things with the females and defend the females. And they get very territorial about their females. But it turns out 3 roosters and 6 hens is a really bad ratio. They're not getting enough of the nookie, and so they get really frustrated and they come after the humans. And so my kids, the whole idea was to give my kids an experience to go in and collect eggs. And pretty soon they're coming back to the house with these like gripping combat stories of going in and trying to get the eggs as the roosters are flapping at them and pecking at them and clawing at them. And they're like, I don't want to go collect the eggs anymore. It's mortifying. And so I go down there and I start getting attacked. And I gave them the woodshed treatment, kick them around a bunch of times and try to show them who's boss. And that worked for a couple of weeks. They saw tall man, don't mess with tall man, but they would still mess with the little kids that went in for the eggs. And so I asked my neighbor, I said, what should I do? He said, if you release them, then I'm just going to have to kill them. I said, what do I do? Do I pluck them? He said, well, you should pluck them yourself. I mean, I looked into a lot of different options. And I called local places to process 2 roosters. He said, what are you talking about? We don't process 1 rooster, 2. You do it yourself. No one was going to do it for me. And it was clear it was not in the cards for me to pluck and clean a chicken at this point. Maybe we'll get there. So I went down to kill it. 2 of them. There were 2 very aggressive. So I wanted to have 1 rooster left because it was the beta rooster with the 6 hens. It would protect them but not attack the kids. That's the idea. And it would have a good ratio so it could do its thing with them. And then I would buy 2 more hens to replace, and everything would be fine. Well, I went down to try to kill them, and it was really hard. You're supposed to try to grab them by the neck and swing them around, and then you crack their neck, and then they die. That's what the neighbor told me, neighbor Frank. And I couldn't get them. Yeah. I couldn't get them. I tried. It wasn't.
Couldn't catch
them.
Then
I said, I'll stun them with a spade shovel. And so I tried to stun them with a spade shovel to knock them down and then go for the neck and twist them around. Except I hit them, but it didn't work. And I wasn't going to try to cut their head off with it. So I was stunning them, but it wasn't stunning them enough for me to get them. And there were 2 of them, and then they would run into the coop and huddle on each other and protect each other. And I felt bad for them. Like this was a traumatizing experience for everybody. And I don't like to harm animals that I don't have to harm. So finally, I came upstairs and I'm like, babe, I think I need to shoot them. I think that's the only way to do it. So I went down there with my 9mm and I flushed them out of the coop. I ran in there and pushed them out. And then you had to run. It was not cool looking. You think it's gangsters. I'm like running around over here, trying to get them in the corner. I'm trying to get the hens away from the roosters. Finally, I get close enough, and I'm like, and it took about 4 shots.
How many shots does it? 4 shots each?
It took about 4 shots each, yeah, to get them where I needed them. And then they still got the twitch muscles.
How many of those shots hit?
What?
They're quick. How many of those shots hit?
I mean,
were you missing?
I hit with all 4, but it took them to make sure they were down,
And you killed both?
I killed 2 of them, yeah. And then I gave them I said a prayer over them, and discarded of them into the wilderness. I let the woods eat them. I checked on them the next day, and I'm sure the coyotes got to them. We got a bunch of coyotes out here. So, and then all has been fine since.
There's this country song that I love called Gallo de Cielo. It's about a fighting rooster, and he's got one eye rolling around in his head, and I just picture, but he can't be beat in a cockfight. He can't be beat, and he's like this famous rooster, but he's all jacked from all his fighting. And I just picture this rooster who got hit with a spade shovel with one eye rolling around his head.
Bill, I'm telling you, he took
crazy
shots that no human could take, and he bounced right back. And he looked at me, and he'd come right back for more. I mean, it was intimidating. Now I see what cockfighting's about, like why people would do it. Because these roosters, they get up, they get big, they get their necks going, they get the whole thing going, and they look gnarly. And the kids were done. They were done. And the whole point is to let the kids experience it, not be. My mom's terrified of chickens because she grew up on a chicken farm, a real chicken farmer, like hundreds and thousands of chickens. I did not. So I'm going back to my roots with 7 chickens. It's going great. The eggs are great.
Get a donkey. Get a donkey. That's my big sales push to Pete. I've been saying it.
We just put in the horse fence. We're going with horses, and we're looking for a donkey too. You've given me that advice from the beginning, and donkey's eventually going to be part of it.
You're never going to regret that donkey. Even when he yells, you're going to love it. It's going to be hilarious.
I love the sound.
You're going to laugh
the sound
every
of the
time.
roosters. Come on. I mean, the sound of the rooster is two things to me. It's just a wonderful sound, and then it also takes me as a good Christian, and as my name is Peter, and so every time I hear the rooster crow, I'm reminded that I deny Jesus every day, and I need him. It's a good reminder out in the country.
From a rooster?
The rooster reminds me. Absolutely, because the rooster crowed and reminded Peter that he denied Jesus 3 times. So,
oh, look at that. Yeah. Here I am telling you to get a donkey because you're going to have an on-farm comedian every time you go outside. He's just going to make you laugh. It's going to be great. All right, let's move to this. There's a story in Parents Magazine. It cites a research article from Pediatrics that delayed milestones from the CDC. CDC has set milestones for children, and they're delaying them. So, like when a child should crawl, when a child should acquire linguistic capabilities, language, they're delaying it. And then there was also someone who noticed that Pampers or Huggies or somebody is now advertising pull-up diapers for kids up through the age of 6T. So that's 6 years old, right? Yes, toddlers. Mm-hmm. They're calling a 6-year-old a toddler. Right.
I have a 6-year-old daughter diapers right now. So you're telling me my 6-year-old daughter would still be potentially wearing pull-ups?
When did the kids stop? Like 2, right? If I remember correctly, 1.5?
I don't even remember. Little girls, they're like, this is gross. I'm done at 1.5 sometimes. Yeah.
What do you think this is about? I have a theory. I want to hear
your theory. Your theories are always, they provide a good launching point. What is your theory?
All right. You may not like it. Okay. So here's where my mind went on this. So first of all, there is a scientific correlation between the intelligence level of a species and its level of childhood and gestation. So human beings have the longest gestation, right? Like other animals spit their offspring out really quick. And then those offspring take a horse, right? Which you'll soon know about. He's up and walking that day. He's up and running. And he's gangly for a little bit. But, but monkeys and children and things with higher level intellects, and as we get longer lifespans, take longer to arrive into, first of all, life on the ground, and then adulthood. And I do wonder, as we sort of progress into longer lifespans, and I think that we are in a superior intellectual state than we were, say, 200 years ago, or at least we have a much greater wealth of information and knowledge. I don't know about the growth in wisdom, but we definitely are working on a higher intellectual plane. I do wonder, I don't want my kid around in pull-ups till 5 or 6, but I do wonder if this isn't what will happen. Like the length of childhood gets longer. And maybe it's not such a bad thing.
I think that's the dumbest shit you've ever said, Will. Everyone who heard that is now dumber for having heard it. I reward you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
I got another point. I'm going to double down.
Okay, please.
How about this? I'm going to get some agreement on this. Men develop at an incredibly slow rate, and we are beginning to understand that men don't have full frontal lobe development. The number they put it at is like age 25. It's not a hard line, but it's later than you think, right? And we go out into society, here we are making career decisions, what we major in. I mean, hell, who we marry before we even are fully developed in our frontal lobe. And maybe we should start thinking about like taking gap years, being more patient with men. Don't go straight to college, or, after college, don't go right off into your career, whatever it may be. Like, we need to start accepting that some level of development, and I know this is not like, I don't want kids to be adolescents until they're 30, but we need to acknowledge that this happens. You remember it? Like when the clouds part for you, and it wasn't 18, it's not 17, when you start kind of going, oh, that's the consequence of my actions. Now, I'm not making this as an argument to wear pull-ups until you're 5, but I am saying that there is something to this, like becoming an adult might take a little longer than we think.
I think it's. I always
What do you say to
appreciate your
that?
willingness to explore.
Are you dumber?
What?
No, here we go. I was going to see if you said I just made you dumber again.
Nope. I always appreciate your willingness to explore. I really do. I think the devolution of men, or especially of men, let's stick to men here but it could apply in both directions. The devolution of men is a reflection of a lack of a foundation not being instilled earlier and earlier through almost every single institution. And I'm not trying to just make a stupid everybody gets a trophy argument. I'm really not, because I'm dealing with the same thing, and you are too. Like, we're trying to raise boys that will become men in a society that treats them a lot differently than it would have, say, 80 years ago or 50 years ago, when a 17-year-old would be begging to be 18 so he can go fight in World War II. Like, that's a really, really different mentality.
And get married.
And yeah, absolutely. It's a very different mentality. But I think that those young men were raised with an ethos from their dads and from the church and from the Rotary Club or from whatever, that sort of said, this is what men do. Men work, men protect, men have an honor code, men live by a standard, and men take risks, and men explore, and this is who we, and so that was just part of who you were growing up, and what your dad probably didn't tell you that they loved you, even though I tell my kids I love them all the time. And there was just a totally different way in which you were raised, which led to, by default, you're growing up. And so we do small things now where I think I'm bold because I tell my kids not to wear helmets when they're biking, which is such a reduction of but I do make them wear helmets when they're driving their dirt bikes. That probably wasn't the case 40 years ago. You know what I mean? I mean, so 40 years in the 80s, it would go. So we're all softer. We're all more in touch with our feelings. And I think that slows down the historical maturity of men, which I don't think is good, because I think the longer that men wander, the more we all wander, because men have a charge to lead and to build and to protect. And the more they don't take that mantle, the more everything floats. And it takes more time for bad ideas and bad structures to take place underneath it. So, I mean, diapers for 6-year-olds, I mean, that's parents having issues. But
yeah, I do
think
not the diapers, the theory.
We just bubble wrap, and I don't think we're getting smarter. I think we're getting dumber, Will. That's where your theory falls apart. Like, men are getting more in touch with their feelings, when your feelings are the thing that guide you with the least amount of reliability. I know that's the case in my life for the most part. It is forged intuitions and principles and virtues that took longer than they should for most of us. But if there had been more intentional and institutional investment in creating those things, maybe it would have come about sooner.
All right, I'm arriving at a middle ground here. It has nothing to do with diapers. This is what I'm thinking. Okay, just because let's acknowledge reality. It does take men a long time to have the clouds part. Whether or not that means frontal lobe development or whatever that is scientifically, I don't know. But you probably remember the rough range for you in your life, Pete. And I can tell you mine. Mine's 20. It was 25, but I think somewhat coincidentally. So what I think that means is just have patience. You should still, like, I say I'm not raising boys. I say I'm raising men, right? I said to one of my sons last night, because yesterday was a big day, and because we had some parent-teacher conferences, and there was a lot going on yesterday here in the household of Cain.
I got to hear about that this weekend.
And I said, look,
you're going to have to fill me in.
Yeah, I said to one of my sons last night, I'm raising you to be a man and how to be the best man you can be. But I also need to have grace and patience. So on the other hand, I think that's what my takeaway is have patience, because it takes time, and they're not finished products at the age of 13 or 12. So just understand that. But second, here's when the clouds parted for me. Okay, my dad died when I was 25. Okay, before that, I'm living on a ranch in Montana. Okay, let's be real. I'm living on a ranch in Montana, being a cowboy. And after that, big stark change. Grow up now. Grow up now. Go start your career. Go adhere to responsibilities outside of your own ambition or desire. And so I think those moments, you talk about how it used to be, kids or men would have experienced those moments that force you into adulthood quicker when you're confronted with more risky aspects of life that are somewhat insulated from our kids today. So what I think is the answer is, while you have patience with kids and you're growing them and encouraging them to become men, also at the same time taking risks that force you into moments of becoming an adult. And being a war fighter is one of those things, you know?
Yeah,
but also
I mean,
being
that was around
adventurer.
25 for me too. There's no doubt that was a massive turn. But don't you think? I mean, do you think you would have benefited from 5 more years on a ranch, or do you think you benefited? No, right? So I think our kids will benefit, just like I benefited from going to combat, and I think our kids would benefit from a man in their life saying, "It's time to grow up. Like, put away childish things." Like there's a moment at which it doesn't mean it has to be at 18 or 20 or 24 or whatever, but in my case it was war, and in other case it was tragedy for you. There are reasons that those things happen, but I think in history it's been a lot more of a man or a parent in their life saying, now is time, now get out of the house and go figure it out and provide. And we get a lot of parents cocooning saying, live near me, with me, on me as long as you want, and then you just delay that.
So that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, look, my event is something that happened to me. Your event is something you chose to do. So I think what my takeaway is, like, encourage your kids to go take risks, because those risks, and it doesn't have to be a war fighter, but I mean, that's go start a business when you're 18 or 19. It doesn't
have to be a war fighter at all. Just go out and try and do and build and work and
fail
something. Yes.
Yeah, and then you become a man. That's helps part the clouds. All right, I think we arrived at that. Now let's end on an extremely juvenile conversation. Music. So my 16-year-old, and you can judge me. By the way, I wouldn't begrudge you or anybody watching or listening judging me. I stopped listening to rap music in about 1995, Pete. I think most dudes listen to rap at some point. Mine was probably high schoolish to
You didn't listen
early
to rap
college.
at all in college?
A little, but that's when I made a full transition to country. And like, I'm talking about like West Coast, like Dr. Dre, you know, Ice Cube. And I was telling my boys rap was better then. Like, I don't, whatever they're doing now, where they just machine gun words at me, I'm not into it, right? And I just have this conception. And my son says to me, he listened to some, and by the way, none of it's appropriate. And I went back and listened to it, and it's vulgar. And I'm not just saying that as a prude. It's not, because I'm listening to some new rap now. That's where we're going with this. And I don't like the vulgarity. Not just as a prude, I think it makes it shallow, like very shallow in an unappealing way. And so when I listen to some of that old rap, I'm like, it's shallow musically and it's shallow message-wise, right? It just doesn't have any depth to it. But my son's like, new rap is way better. And he had me start listening to Kanye. And I got to tell you something. He's a genius. It's next level. And Pete, I've tried a few other things. Lawrence Jones told me to listen to J. Cole or Kendrick Lamar, and I tried some of that, and it's pretty okay. But I'm telling you something about Kanye West. And by the way, some of it's real shallow still. It's braggadocious, and it's vulgar, and it's a lot of cuss words, and I get all that. If it turns you off too much, I would understand. It does me sometimes. I'm like, no, we're not listening to that. And it does make me think, why are my sons familiar with these songs and listen to this stuff? But musically, Pete, Kanye's a genius.
Interesting. You got to send me whatever song you're referring to. I agree. When I go back and look at the 90s or 2000s rap, you know, whatever, Ludacris, Mace, P. Diddy, Snoop, all the stuff that Dr. Dre.
You want to talk about P. Diddy today?
Friend, what?
You want to talk about P. Diddy?
We could talk about P. Diddy.
You don't know.
You pick it.
It's okay. You don't know.
What would I not know about P. Diddy?
We're not going to. We can't do it. It's too much in the world of rumor and allegation.
Oh no,
right
I don't have it.
So,
but I do know, like, I've got a Kanye West song, "Flashing Lights," which probably doesn't qualify, and I know it's like 15 years ago. but I really like it. So it wouldn't surprise me if I like some of it. And I, by the way, downloaded his entire Christian album, which he did, I don't know, what was it?
Yeah.
4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's really good. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's obviously is he doing like secular rap now too? Or is this the same stuff?
It all is pretty egotistical and at times vulgar, but like Good Morning, Homecoming, Jesus Walks. My point is just like listening to it. It's enjoyable in a way that it has melody and production and harmony, and it's like music. Where sometimes you listen to rap, you're like, it's just not music in a enjoyable way. But
I agree.
You,
I mean, I think
Kanye,
I think he's immensely talented. I had a moment in the car yesterday. My 10-year-old daughter is singing the lyrics to a rap song from, a Sirius XM channel that I never listened to, but I think they listen to in the car on their way to school with their mother. And she has a little radio in her room that can tune the local radio stations that they've, put out by the outside when they play outside a little bit. And I realized she knows the rap lyrics and I have no idea. And here I am exactly where my parents were as I'm humming some tune that I probably have no idea what the lyrics actually are. And that's what my wife says all the time. Your kids, usually the lyrics are going like this over the top of their head as we bemoan what they say. They're just like the tune and they like the words. I don't know what to do with that quite yet because I want to be a total grouch. But my wife is trying to prevent that. I don't know.
Well, I've been stuck in country music, and I'm not stuck. I love it for 30 years. So this is a new exploration for me, and just kind of. By the way, you can't protect your kids from it. There's nothing you can do. So good luck to you on that. Like, they're gonna hear it. So it's like anything else. Just talk to them about it or whatever. And I'm trying to listen to what they're actually. Yeah,
you're right.
And I'm trying to understand what they're listening to a little bit. Which even if they,
but like the rest of the
we lived
world,
up
when
to the
Ludacris came out at the halftime show, I was loving it. And so was every like white kid from suburbia in the late 90s and early 2000s who loved Ludacris, but couldn't, didn't really know. Yeah. And it couldn't relate.
All right. I think we lived up to our billing. Off the rails today.
Thank you, brother.
Hegseth.
Good to
Thanks,
see you.
man. All right. See you this weekend.